everyone, and welcome to the first edition of Populist Monthly, a political podcast where I take an in-depth look into the political news and events that have been happening. Now, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have a fancy college degree or anything like that, but I'm a populist liberal, so my ideas come from my reality, how I live day to day as a working-class citizen of this country. I say I'm a liberal because I care about the poor, the environment, and social justice, but I'm also a populist because I want to protect American jobs and not displace workers in their communities. We've lived with stagnant wages and less benefits and union busting for too long. It's time that the working man got his say in our so-called democracy. And I also say so-called democracy because I'm under the belief, like many Americans, that our system is corrupt by big business and favor corporate interests. That's why we're the only industrialized country without universal health care, because the private health sector bought off the politicians. We as Americans are trying to take the next step into the future, and if we continue to rely on these private insurance companies, we'll simply continue to have more poverty in this country. That's why I'm a populist liberal. I support policies that the populace wants. Health care, higher wages, affordable college, basic income, higher taxes on the rich, lower taxes on the poor, green energy revolution to combat climate change, the women's right to choose, common sense gun reforms, ending the gender pay gap. All these vital political issues I lean liberal on, and I'm going to continue explaining why I'm a liberal after this break, so stay tuned for more Populist Monthly with Sid Tucker. Alright, welcome back, and now it's time for me to talk about the dreaded L word. Now, hear me out for a second. Please hear me out for a second. I'm a liberal because I believe in the freedom of the individual and governmental guarantees of individual rights and liberties. The state needs to provide economic security and equality of opportunity for its taxpayers and should actively reorder society in a way that is conducive to such developments legitimated by a democratic elected majority. Not a super state, not a big government, an effective state and an effective government. Now, a nation that continues to spend more on tax cuts for the wealthy, subsidies for large corporations and oil companies, and military than on programs of social uplift is a nation built off the backs of the many for luxuries to the few. If we can spend money on bombs, we can spend money to help the common man and woman as well. Now, honestly, on those bombs I was referring to, if Biden recently announced he's going to end the war in Afghanistan. I think that's great. He's pulling troops out as we speak. But if we continue bombings on Afghanistan or elsewhere to appease the military-industrial complex and the neoconservative warmongers, and very likely continue killing innocent civilians along the way, we'd be creating many more martyrs going to their deaths in retaliation against the retaliation, as shown from previous events. Because you cannot stop a person who's ready to die. I mean, we've created more terrorism through these actions. The never-ending war on terror will never end unless we all collectively want it to, okay? These endless wars are too expensive. At a time of crippling deficit, a huge debt, a gigantic wealth and income inequality gap that's left millions starving and stuck in welfare cliffs, to not be able to become productive and healthy members of society, or dealing with an illness or college debt that's financially stricken them, we can't in good conscience say that effective governmental action to build programs of employment and tax revenue reallocation isn't the answer. But crony capitalist Republican mathematical fallacies of increasing spending on military, but only to decrease revenues and taxation, only to cut programs that the majority of Americans rely on to survive, is the answer. Now, the endless war on terror must end for our economic survival. Another populist liberal from my state, Missouri, Mr. Harry Truman, also once said, a pessimistic one who makes difficulties of his opportunities. No, a pessimistic one makes difficulties of his opportunities, but an optimist is one who makes opportunities out of his difficulties. Let me get that quote right. That's how I feel about capitalism as a whole. We need to create opportunity, not difficulty. And as JFK once said, we don't believe in big government, we believe in effective government. So after years of neoliberalism with guys like Clinton and Obama, not that I hate those guys, I love Clinton and Obama, what they did, the good things they did, but they obviously had some missteps, had some bad calls. And they did some crony capitalistic things that I did not like. So after years of those kinds of policies and much suffering around the world, because we are the superpower of the world, it's time for a true political revolution where we take back our government from the oligarchic powers that be. You know what I mean? We got to vote out the corrupt. Vote out the corrupt politicians in our government, reform government, provide luxuries to the many and not the few. Now, the failed war on drugs, I'm going to call it that. The failed war on drugs also needs to be addressed. The majority of prisoners we have today are there for non-violent drug offenses. If someone wants to hit a little doobie or hit their acid to ease their stress, then who are we to say we must control their bodies and make sure they aren't doing substances? Drugs being illegal is why gangs and drug dealers profit and thrive on criminal activity. It's time to stop the war on drugs. Now, a woman's right to choose to have an abortion falls into the bodily category as well. So we must maintain that the government stay out of our bodies. I'm sick of big government. I need it out of my body. Get it out of my body. I want to do what I want. Leave me alone. Now, John Locke, the godfather of liberalism, once wrote that new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed. New opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any reason but because they are not already common. So when I say things like abolish ICE, for example, ICE, a program that wasn't even created until the Patriot Act, people get upset at me personally. They get upset and think I mean Customs and Border Protection. Excuse me. People in general say that immigration is a big problem in this country and that immigrants are taking our jobs, or we should build a wall of separation at the southern border. Not only is this a stupid solution that doesn't solve the root problem, but is also hella expensive and unnecessary. The root of the problem is the lack of jobs in Mexico. We should work with Mexico to help create jobs in their country by ending NAFTA and other failed outsourcing trade agreements that killed their agriculture in the first place. Then we do what Richard Ojeda of West Virginia said. We use UAV technology instead of a wall, which is far more efficient in finding illegal immigrants crossing the border anyway. So yes, abolish ICE and end family separation as well. We gotta put these families back together because it's important. They're children and parents. They need to be back together. Just because they cross the border, that means we should end families? Just get out of here. Guns are an epidemic in this country. Every other day there's a mass shooting. 96 people die every day from gun-related deaths, whether it be suicides, homicides, etc. We need common sense gun regulation, including universal background checking, gun licensing, expanded psychiatric evaluations, and investment in mental health in this country. I mean, if other countries can have common sense gun laws, then why can't we, honestly? Also, on the topic of universal healthcare, I touched on this earlier, healthcare should be decoupled from work. John Stewart said this once. You need to make sure that employers are not responsible for their health care, because what that would do is free people up to have more mobility in terms of changing jobs and not worrying about illness putting them into bankruptcy and all those types of situations we're in now. The only way to do that is through a single payer system. It's the only way, it's the only system that will effectively manage health care and keep costs down. It honestly is. Now, sorry for that. Let's sum up the rest of my thoughts here on my general ideological stances on things. We need criminal justice reform so police are less aggressive and less prejudiced and brutal to people, including people of color in this country. We need women to earn just as much money as men do for just as much work, because that isn't a myth. The gender pay gap is not a myth. It's proven in economic studies. We must protect the women's right to choose whether or not to have an abortion, so we can keep orphanages and foster families from overcapacity. And we need to fully fund a complete reversal of climate change through transitioning into clean energy and funding climate reversal technology like geoengineering, for example. I know not a lot of people are not a fan of geoengineering, but I am, so I do support geoengineering. I do think we should invest in technology to artificially reduce carbon emissions and stuff like that in the environment. Also, I touched on this earlier, like a few other things I have, but we also desperately need a freedom dividend to help reduce wealth and income inequality. Now, talking about welfare, I am perfectly okay with restructuring welfare with a universal basic income if necessary. Now, another thing this is from Andrew Yang. Another thing Andrew Yang purported was democracy dollars. This would basically give you $100 to spend on any political campaign you want. This would give more money, more power to the people, and not multinational corporations when it comes to who is and who isn't elected. I'm a big fan of Andrew Yang. His idea of the VAT tax, which, by the way, I know the T stands for tax, but I'm calling it a VAT tax anyway. But about this tax, poor people technically, only technically, get taxed at a bigger percentage of their disposable income because they spend it quicker. That's why a VAT alone is bad. But give working class people money greater than their money lost by the VAT, i.e. the freedom dividend, and then it's no longer regressive. The net effect is that the UBI is $900 instead of $1,000. That's still $900 more than you had before. So the VAT combined with the UBI is great for reducing wealth and income inequality gap. The wealth and inequality. God, I can't talk today. It's great for reducing the wealth and income inequality gap we see today. Andrew Yang is basically the economic Paul Revere. The robots are indeed coming, and they're coming for your jobs. Automation is a problem, and UBI is a solution. Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers, he was a populist liberal as well, and he supported it. Martin Luther King Jr. Supported UBI, and the man himself, Barack Obama, I supported a universal basic income because a couple years ago I figured out it's a no-brainer. So there you go. That's my Obama impression for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, you can look at what I've said here and dismiss it only to turn to what the conservatives of this country want to do. Take healthcare away from 32 million people, give huge tax cuts to billionaires and large profitable corporations, slash Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without any replacement, and allow the planet to be destroyed by climate change, global warming. So you can do that, or just ignore the bad parts of the left that I do. You know, like the SJW woke style culture, which I'm okay with some of that stuff. I'm kind of neutral on that stuff, but I know a lot of people are turned off by that. But the policies speak for themselves. I mean, we need to deal with the highest childhood poverty rate of any industrialized nation. Poverty killing more than heart disease or cancer is bad. 564,708 Americans at the time of this recording are homeless. Probably more due to the COVID response. Sorry, not the response. The COVID Delta variant stretching before I upload this. 43.1 million live in poverty. Between 18,000 and 22,000 die from lack of health insurance. It's bad out there, man. So yes, I am a populist liberal Democrat from Missouri. I hope you like that, because now I've given you my manifesto. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the news after this break, so stay tuned. You're listening to Populist Monthly with Sid Tucker. Welcome back to Populist Monthly. Now, let's talk about the news. The military is mandating vaccines within weeks. Mandating vaccines. This is great news for the country, in my opinion. I think there should be a nationwide vaccine mandate, in all honesty. Not like forcing people to get vaccines exactly, but making it law that they cannot go to work without getting some sort of vaccine and real proof of it. This plague is never going to be out of our lives if we continue spreading it among each other. I'm proudly vaccinated, and I think everyone should be. Mainly because, for one thing, you still take government-approved drugs. So if you're anti-government medicine, then why are you still taking your medicine? I don't understand it. Also, the vaccine has been proven to not have anything other than anti-coronavirus medicine in them. Because, like, what on earth could it possibly be? What else could be in it? Has Alex Jones or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. really convinced you that there's some sort of autism juice in it? No, don't be ridiculous. I live in the real world, my dude. So, yes, I stand by my military's decision to mandate the vaccine, and I hope they don't budge on this decision. The military has plenty of anti-vax right-wing loons, so expect a lot of protests for some idiotic reason. I love the military. I love the veterans. I love the military, but they have some right-wingers in there. Some of them are a little crazy, but I respect the troops, and just remember that if you're not vaccinated, you're literally spreading a plague amongst families, children, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, etc. You're a horrible human being if you're not vaccinated. I mean, you claim to be pro-life, yet you're in favor of things like spreading the plague and the death penalty. You know, if it wasn't for the right wing's double standards, they'd have no standards. You feel me? It's just absurd. Next, let's look at Biden's $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation plan. I've been waiting to do this all day. It includes monthly benefits for parents, like continuing the policy where nearly every family in America started receiving $300 per child under 6 and $250 per kid age 6 to 17. But the benefits won't continue past this year unless the Democrats pass the reconciliation bill expanding it, which is good. It also includes a national pay leave proposal, including expanding on the Family and Medical Leave Act, which currently guarantees 12 work weeks of unpaid leave for workers at companies with more than 50 employees. The bill is seen to many lawmakers as a do-or-die moment for national paid leave, since the U.S. is the only developed country without paid leave policy, which is made 10 times worse due to the COVID plague. Now, why can other countries have nice things and why can't we? Because our politicians are corrupt by corporations. I have to yell it at you people. Not you people, not my fans. I love you fans. But to the people, my detractors, I have to yell that. Continuing with this reconciliation bill, this bill includes probably my favorite part. Tax reform, yes. Besides the climate change stuff, which I'll get into later, but this part is really important because of an important distinction I made in it. That they made in it. Now, I, like many other Americans, hate taxes. I hate paying taxes. I don't earn a high enough income to really... I just don't earn a high income, and the money goes towards things like wars and other things like that. But I do understand the importance of taxes, don't get me wrong. And the things it pays for, like utilities, police, fire departments, and such. Seeing the Democrats want to raise taxes on corporations and the wealthy and not families earning less than $400,000 a year is a great thing. No new taxes on the middle class or working poor, in my opinion. We've been treaded on long enough. Fun fact about taxation, though, the government misses out on $1 trillion annually due to taxpayer noncompliance. Think about how many wealthy, elitist, fat cat tax cheats there are in this country who need to pay their fair share. We need that money to help balance the budget and provide programs for the poor. Now, the Democrats are also pushing for Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing care, while also lowering the current Medicare age slightly, just slightly. Now, that's all well and good, but I'd still like to see some sort of universal health care plan on the table. Expanding Medicare to cover everyone might be niche within the Democratic Party establishment, but among the populist voters, it's very popular in nearly every poll. Another fun fact, here's a fun fact about healthcare. Did you know that according to most studies, we save roughly $17 trillion over 10 years by switching from Obamacare to a single-payer healthcare system? Now, that's just amazing to me, but there is a plan with broad support to expand coverage of Medicare judging by how people like Mike Parsons and other conservative lunatics that want to see poor people die in their state, and the corrupt Senate and Congress that won't support any program expansion that would hurt private health insurance companies' profits. Those are the kinds of reasons why I don't see any hope for Medicare expansion yet. We need to elect more progressives in order to really expand Medicare and provide universal health care coverage to everyone. We need a populist takeover of the Democratic Party. Now, here's another issue that the Democrats are getting to. Immigration. Now, the Senate Judiciary Committee is tasked with providing, quote, lawful permanent status for qualified immigrants as part of the Democrats' budget reconciliation package. The plan aims to grant green cards to millions of immigrant workers and families. Seeing this in a bipartisan package is actually pretty great, if you ask me. I would never expect the modern Republican Party to stoop to such low levels as common sense, decent humanity towards migrant people of color. The details aren't in stone yet, so expect some catches, but the bottom line is we have less exclusion and more inclusion in American society. Liberal institutions, in my opinion, and probably in the opinions of most people, are the liberal institutions are the most reliable way to protect people's autonomy. Since anarchist organizations and societies have always failed on a large scale, and and stuff like diversity, giving the migrants, I'm having trouble speaking today, giving migrants green cards and to millions of immigrant workers and such. Diversity is good because exposing people of different identities, backgrounds, etc. to each other allows people to be more familiar and informed about people different from them, and leads to people treating minorities well. There will be a gradient of cultures and people between countries, but it'll just be less stark. The existence of multiple cultural lineages within a single polity is ideal. And for those of you, I don't want to get into this. Those of you Nazis, you notice we have a rise of Nazis in this country. We saw it in Charlottesville. We have a rise of Nazism. Nazis back. I thought us American patriots stopped Nazism once and for all, but nope. So for those of you Nazis listening to this podcast, I just want to let you know the so-called red pill, the red pill you anti-American Nazi scum believe in, is just racism and prejudice. Well, duh, that goes without saying, but it's a combination of anti-Semitist conspiracy theories and outdated bell curve pseudoscience. It's all debunked and moronic. Race reductionists use insufficient statistics, selective studies done by discredited universities, and pseudoscience to justify racist policies, to regress demographics, and closed border policies. The outliers within the ethnicities, the institutionalized treatments of minorities, the socioeconomic and environmental factors, and the credible studies done by institutes like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton that show that the brains of human beings between ethnicities are the same, and that the differences are in physical attributes. This proves that the pseudoscientific racism promoted by those in the Nazi camp of the right wing, it proves that these studies and such are highly discredited information from books like The Bell Curve, and they're false. Take into account the statistics listed in these studies, such as, quote, black people make up 13% of the population but make up 15% of the murders, end quote. Those arguments fall apart when you look at the numbers and find out it's only 4,000 people, specifically black murderers that year, compared to 42 million black people in the U.S. That's why they say the percentage instead of the number. The percentage makes it seem like if you see a black person, there is a 50-50% chance that they will murder you. Then you find out that's less than 1% of black people. That's literally less than 1%. This happens consistently throughout the arguments of race reductionists and its propaganda to promote dishonest pseudoscientific white supremacy under the guise of being intellectual. But sorry for that tangent, I just really had to get that off my chest. I hate the prejudiced and I hate the intolerant. We just got to get that out of the way. But anyway, back to this Biden reconciliation plan. And I'm done stumbling over my words. When it comes to climate change in this bill, there are plans to give billions to clean electricity, electric vehicles, energy-efficient buildings, weatherizing homes, a civilian climate corps, and even more things that I don't even have time to list right now. For real, there's so much in this. This is a bold step towards combating climate change, in my opinion. Now, I'm a big fan of Tesla and Elon Musk, so seeing the electric cars investment really amused me for some reason. But yeah, these are great policies, and the goals of 80% clean electricity and 50% economy-wide carbon emission reductions by 2030 are very lofty. I applaud the Biden administration to take this bold step, and I urge everyone listening to this podcast, pick up the phone, get your local senators and congresspeople and governors to support this reconciliation bill. Our infrastructure is a mess, and together as Republicans and Democrats, we can fix it, and we will talk about it later on in this podcast when we come back. Hey, we're back, and we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. To conclude today's edition of Populist Monthly, I'd like to remind people to get vaccinated, wear a mask, and together, as patriots, we will eradicate COVID from our lives. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for next month's edition of Populist Monthly. I wish you all a very good day, and peace.